that the strategy here is to fill in the gaps and to heal it. By the way, this is pretty interesting here. It's very complex. It could be really terrific. But in black are the great healing buildings that we're inserting. We also discovered that the code used to build the north of Farris and south of Farris were different. And so we've done a very refined, very precise code. And I'm going to end by speaking of the code and how important it is that the code be light, that the code be part of the solution and not just simply be part of the problem, which it has been and it promises to be. So this is what it's like, okay? Not from the air, too many black roofs, but this is Farris. The inn is terrific. The inn's extension is terrific. This might join the inn. By the way, this is in the long range. This should join the inn, and there should be no impediment. You have terrible sort of boxy buildings, obviously. When this becomes really nice, this will go away. And then you have an incredibly dull bank. What could be duller than a bank? Hardly anything. And it's important. You, of course, have a great Episcopalian church here. This is a great intersection. It requires repair only here with the bank. And so you'll see that we're scabbing on a kind of cafe to the front of the bank. This is the drawing that we did of it. To understand it becomes much clearer when you draw it. You can see the flat, non-contributing building. You can see the big gap that's made here. And then this is what we propose to do. Notice that the gaps have been filled. Notice the bank gets an addition that makes a very nice courtyard in front. Excellent cafe, restaurant, Southwestern working. This continues. This is an infill, replacing a bad building. This is an infill. Nothing enormous, no silver bullets, just coding the intention of healing the streets. So over time, as the buildings get replaced, it gradually becomes better and better and better. In other words, it's a code that actually is all about what the intention is. Whenever you have a code that knows what it wants to be, the code immediately becomes thin. When you get a fat, unwieldy code, that's a code that doesn't know what the city wants to be, but it makes the lawyers happy because there's all sorts of virtues like equality and precision and so forth. But you say, what city does this make? Well, we don't know, but it's fair, right? Everybody has the same parking ratio. Everybody has the same setback. It's fair, and we'll win the lawsuits when we get sued. But basically, it has no intention. And the thin codes are the ones that are very intentional, that really are coordinated with a plan. The thick codes are lawyer codes. It can only be interpreted by lawyers or architects who are like lawyers. And those are not the best architects. They don't understand the city. Parking is in the back. Plenty of parking still in the back. And of course, this will come to you labeled. Okay, labeled. This is the existing street. Very speedy, wide lane street. By the way, it doesn't have that many cars. And it doesn't even have that many lanes. It's just that everything is so wide that the cars go at 35, 45, 50 miles an hour. It's not the number of cars that's hostile, it's the speed. Okay, it's the speed that's a problem. And so when you why would you bury the wires? Is it enough to bury the wires? No, you bury the wires in order to plant trees. That's the obvious second step. So we came here and you were spending millions of dollars burying the wire. And we said, well, where are the trees? Well, we haven't thought about it. Well, the planters are too narrow. This is the proposal. Okay, the proposal is to have parked cars that provide a buffer for the pedestrian, because the psychology of the speeding car is very unpleasant. Shade and spatial definition, not cobra heads that make your skin look sallow and sick. And wider sidewalks, reservation for future transit. Remember, this is long-term, and the younger people want transit. You know, that's a checklist item. You know, even LA is getting transit, streetcar, and this is the new section. And of course, these are the pipes that we know where they are. Nicely done. This was shown to so this is what you have. And by the way, this is the very, very, very nicest section. Very nice. You know, these quite nice looking apartments are up close. You have a big tree. There are no gaps. This is the nicest section. You bury the wires. Wow, that was worth it. Okay, but this is what matters. You widen the planters and the sidewalks. You put a rumble strip in the middle that is ready for left turn lanes and, you know, certain emergencies and so forth, but it is really for future transit. And then you put the cars in that protect the pedestrians, and then you put the trees in. Okay? This is the transportation. Okay. By the way, you may realize that this is normal. This is merely normal. This is what an American street is supposed to look like. And this is the old standard. This is the old standard of a highway that was, by the way, this street was reamed out. It used to be nice, but it was reamed out as it became committed entirely to the automobile. So that's what you get. By the way, the people that are coming in with blinders that don't even know they're crossing High Point because they've been through miles of horrible sprawl misery, you know, strip development, ugly as can be, you know, speedy cars. So they're coming in like this with their blinders in. They're not going to discover that you have a cool little place here unless you're radical, because they don't open up the blinders until you do what we do there. It has to really, really change, okay? Or they won't notice. They'll go right past it and then go back to their sprawl, and they won't notice. You will have been used as a commuter street. And one way to think about this when we say the commuters are going to be slowed up, well, first of all, it's quite all right to slow them up to 30. It's very efficient. But remember, they're borrowing your main street, okay? The people going through are borrowing your main street, and the people who live on them own the main street. You have to reverse. It's not all about the cars and the people on the side have to put it up. We have to reverse that relationship. And the streetcar that you called for at the last moment, by the way, a Thomasville streetcar. Before we came here, Peter Freeman in his office, Freeman Kinnett, they've been very active in this area. You know, there's been action. And they had a whole series of, also they've been dreaming throughout the recession of things that could be done. They've been looking at the sites, where are the apartment buildings, what can be done here or there. And when we arrived, there were about a dozen projects that they had developed that were very, I think, perceptive. We never would have perceived that these were opportunities. And so here they are, one after the other, quite thoroughly designed, you know, and some of them are already in the pipeline, ready to be built, many of them ready to go. This is one of my favorites. This is an existing building, which was going to be knocked down, and actually, but it's nice. And so they kept it, and they add to the back. That kind of surgical intervention is extremely important. You know, this is your library, this is your museum of furniture, and to really get off the ground, it needs an elevator. You know, very surgical interventions that takes that half mile of Main Street and gets it going. So you can start very quickly, I think, to start doing these things. YMCA, just off the Main Street, etc. Okay, there's stuff to do right away. So we broke up this project into the Uptown Farris intersection that I just described to you. Then there's the library square, the gateway, and then the phase 2, which is the Uptown Wellborn area. By the way, what's holding Wellborn to the future is that it really is miserable. It never was anything but sprawl. You know, it's not as if we're bringing it back to anything. The McDonald's is the original building, you see. So this is a different thing. It's going to take longer. While down here, there were original buildings. There's some genetic material that you can work with, and you can clone it back into shape. So let's look at the library. So here's the library. Here's the Presbyterian Church. And this is the great landmark, which is the Krispy Kreme. And this is, who knows what this is? Nobody's been able to tell me, but which goes to show you that it's not important. This is the library, which is very peculiar because it faces north. Like, why is it facing that way? Isn't that strange? But actually, it was very helpful because it's what you see when you come from the north, and it actually provides this second gateway. Remember, we're only fully revitalizing a half mile, which is a lot. It's really a lot, that half mile. It's longer than, as I said, longer than Greensboro, but we need beginnings and ends, and this provides a great end. Now over here, an earlier generation of traffic engineers had made a mess, and this is what was being repaired with 6 lanes. So we intervened, we designed something, and this is the end. This is the joint design, which is beautifully elegant, a kind of slight figure 8 that actually looks like a square and does a nice job with this existing, this isn't a law office, what is it? A bank, a nice classical bank. And we took down the indescribed buildings, made a bent building like this that actually completes the square. It straddles both sides of the street. Maybe you'll even pave it across. You'll pave it across with the pavers, the rumble strip pavers, so that you have a square that straddles both sides of the main street. And then just by taking the terrible parking lot, which by the way, is not even as good as a Walmart parking lot, because they inherited half the parking lot from an ex-Burger King. So it's incoherent, but when you look at that library, all you see is this incoherent parking in front of it. That's its forecourt. We planted 2 rows of slightly curved alleys of trees like this, under which you can park, cleared it for a green, cleared another one for a green that could become is absolutely set to become a really working farmer's market, which is kind of already happening there already, with the trucks being able to come in and unload. So there's a farmer's market here, something that would really work. There's a beautiful green with the parking underneath, and then additional parking for employees is in the back. And we put a canopy in front of the library because that library has, its entrance is too low. From the car, from this distance, when you're driving down, you don't see it. And you have this spectacular success of the canopy in front of the big building, at the Civic Center downtown, at the Civic Square, where so many things happen, that white canopy. That's a great success. We took the same design, which is almost like a brand for you now, and put it in front of the library so that some of the same kind of stuff can happen, but above all, so that it can be seen as you come in on this axis. And so this is what it looks like, okay? We clean this up, and as you drive down here, the axis hits like that. It just receives you in a beautiful forecourt that shields you. This is a useful building that it's a conventional commercial building, and it plays off the church. We're gonna do a better rendering when we have more time. This is the Krispy Kreme. By the way, and look at how nice this square is. This used to be a terrible traffic intersection, and now it's a seriously nice place. So, because this, I would say, success happened so early in the charrette, there's a lot of disgruntled people that came in at that point and said, what about me? What about my road? What about my problem? There was a whole Johnson Street, too much speeding, people being killed, all this, the whole litany of overspeed street. So we opened up a Pandora's box, and my first take on it is, I understand your problem, it's not on our site, okay? That's not in our outline. But one of you made the case that if we have a success, we will impinge on them. And at least Johnson Street on this side, actually, that they deserve attention. It's very, very close in. And so we said, okay, better get them on our side. And our traffic engineer took on the big problem, which actually is caused way north, as the grid becomes sparser and sparser. This is a nice dense grid, which means you disperse. It's a dense network. The traffic is dispersed going 2 ways. Because the grid is so sparse up here by the highways, because the highways have so few entries, you see what happens is certain streets are privileged, like Commerce and Johnson Street, and Johnson has incredibly speedy traffic as a result of something that's happened 10 miles north. And so they began to engage that. By the way, this is the existing, I'm going back to something. This is the existing condition of the library that I spoke about. This is the kind of mess that we first saw last Wednesday. And then this is what we proposed, and then this is how it ended up. Okay, I was just out of sequence there. Now, in terms of the daily profile, the further in you get, the less cars there are. So you can actually slow down the cars. And the whole idea, I'll show you a book, traffic engineering in the immediate post-war period had a single setting, and it was all about the cars. And there was very little difference between suburban modes and urban modes. And suburban modes, of course, no one was going to walk. And then over the last 5 to 10 years, some transportation engineers, including the two who are present here, actually started an initiative with the Institute of Transportation Engineers in Washington, the ITE, to write a whole new manual which is context-based. And what that means is that yes, we know the cars have to go through, but the design of the road has to respond to the context through which it is crossing. It isn't just about the car, you know, as if it were a piece of plumbing going through speedily. When it enters, when a town is in the countryside, when a thoroughfare is in the countryside, fine, go fast, you know. We'll have swales, we'll have setbacks. But as it enters the city, and it goes through inhabited suburbia, and then the main street, and then the downtown, you can't keep the constant section. It has to change. The lane widths change, the parking changes, the tree changes, everything changes, the geometries change. That is an official document out of Washington that has to be downloaded locally, so it forms part of your standards here. So our guys did all the studies. This is what it takes, you know, we had to prove daily profile, southbound, northbound, all these studies were done to prove that as you come in, you can cool it. You know, it doesn't have to be so speedy. And of course, the main thing is that you can actually get the speed down. We're not lowering the capacity, you have to get the speed down, and mostly it affects Johnson, okay? And is there a synchro coming up automatically here? No, okay. Well, there's a model that we worked, which actually shows the cars moving and what happens as you modify the intersections. The disaster is that Johnson is a one-way pair, okay? It's a one-way pair, and when you have a one-way street, you can do very quickly. And by the way, Johnson is beautiful, and people are living on it, but it's very, very fast. This is the ITE, the new ITE manual, Designing Walkable Urban Thoroughfares, a Context-Sensitive Approach, ITE. This is the equivalent of Moses in the mountain. You know, whoa, okay? You know, this isn't your old hippie mimeograph. This is the real thing. And so that was done. I don't know whether those are going to happen. The other thing that happened is you called in the future for a streetcar, and streetcars are all about the future. And we designed a figure-8 system that works very well, particularly connecting. It gets you from the mall, which is going to be incredibly interesting, to the village center, and it connects the college, the High Point University, with Ferris on this side. It gets you up to the future, Javier? Wellburn, and then it brings you down, you know, which is what you basically need to do. Now, this is a 5-minute walk to the transit stop, and this is a 10-minute walk, which means everybody in this area is within walking distance of a future transit. Extremely efficient. If you ask us why we didn't go south, it's because that's where our site stopped. But this system, you might do an overall system. Now, this is all about reserving right-of-way. This is all about building it. So when you succeed in having people living downtown, when the 21st century finally proves that fuel is too expensive, when the cool young people are here and they don't want to own a car, you're ready. And you don't have to tear everything up again and do it. Okay, so I do know transit does not lead, the population leads. The population will lead before the streetcars are there, but you do have to set up for the streetcar now, or you will tear everything up. And it's wonderful to see how well the system works. Look at how you're blanketed, all the way to the country club, you're blanketed with a pedestrian shed. And then there are the greenways and the bike